Welcome back. Today I wanted to go over a subject that is very dear to me, and it deals with tanking in Final Fantasy XIV. Because there's many people out there that perhaps want to get into tanking, but they're not sure whether they should. Maybe they feel the job is too much work, too much responsibility, too scary to be the one leading the dungeon and your group into battle. That's what the tank does. You take control. It's important to have the desire, the need to want to lead. And you also need to be a masochist of some sort. You need to get some sick satisfaction about being hit. Seeing the enemy kick the shit out of you on screen. Being like, yeah, hit that spot, hit my cheeks, hit my ass, hit my legs, hit the back of my head, break my neck. You need to be that sort of player. That's the mindset of a true tank. Oh yes, fuck me up, baby. Alright, first of all I want to share some footage here with you in the background. Now right now I'm a paladin and the other tank is also a paladin, and I let him main tank because he put on the iron rail, which is the tank stance. And I figured he wants to be a main tank, but can you see what he's doing wrong right away? He's keeping the boss aimed straight at the whole team, and that's why a bunch of people died there. And I figured that's kind of weird, and then I realized he also has that sprout icon with his name, so maybe he's a new player, so here I provoked it from him in order to be the main tank. But the issue here is that this other tank kept provoking the boss back, so I lost the hate constantly, and as that happened he would also keep the boss aimed in completely the wrong direction. Now I don't know if this guy was maybe friends with other players in the party and they were like kind of trolling or thinking it would be funny, or if he was a complete random player amongst other random people. And that's actually even worse. If it's just a pre-made group already, I can kind of see. But this is one of the issues you have as a tank at times during later content, is that you're dealing with other tanks that don't seem to really know how to play their roles, which brings me to a very vital ingredient, which is communication. And in this video I didn't actually communicate at all with anyone of the party. It's a quiet party usually when you enter a duty finder. You know, most people say hello and that's about it, that's the extent of it. This time I didn't even say that, I was just focused on recording a video, but then I realized that it was going to be such a shit show, and that's why communication is key to a certain extent, where you actually ask the other tank whether they're new or not. Now sometimes you're going to run into a situation where here the tank actually provoked it off of me. We're both in tank stands, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll turn it off then, you can main tank this shit. There's the issue. If you don't communicate you might make mistakes here, but then sometimes the other tank won't even communicate back to you, so it's an awkward situation if you're dealing with that. So if that happens to you, don't take it personal. This shit happens to the best of us. It happens actually regularly in the duty finder, where you find silly players like that. And that's actually the extent of what I have to say about it, because I don't want to trash talk anyone. I mean, we all started out somewhere and we all make mistakes all the time, so other than that I just wanted to point out that this was kind of a weird dungeon run that you can come across as a tank yourself if you're getting into it and you don't know what's going on here. Just remember, the main rule is when you're tanking a boss, it's easier to have one person be the main tank and you be the off tank, either focusing on the ads or just focusing on doing damage like all the other DPS, so that way it doesn't get so messy. And then hope that the person who's main tank can actually also turns the boss away from the party, so nobody dies straight away, which happened in this duty finder, as you could see earlier. It's kind of weird. But of course, it's teamwork at the end of the day. It's not just all about the thing. You need the healer more than anything else to at least stay alive. And then the DPS play their role in doing damage to hopefully take out the trash as fast as possible. But you see, it's no secret that Final Fantasy is another MMO where tanks are always in demand. That's why we have that funny saying that there's a tank privilege. If you go into the so-called duty finder to see if you can do a dungeon, more often than not you will see that the duty finder is telling us that we need a tank. The job that is sought out currently, that is in request or adventurer in need, is the tank. And I currently of course have played all the tanks that are in the game, because tank is my main class. It's a paladin, but I like to sometimes switch to the gunbreaker that came out during the Shadowbringer expansion. But so far I still prefer the paladin, because currently I'm not gonna lie, it just also seems like the easiest class to play. Sometimes you're in a dungeon and the healer doesn't keep up for whatever reason, even though I'm using all my cooldowns, all my defensive cooldowns, everything that I have in my arsenal. And the healer is just so focused on doing damage that they almost forget to heal your ass. And then thankfully I do have my clemency skill that can self-heal you as a paladin, which is very nice. The other tanks also have a way to heal themselves, but I feel like the paladin ones it's just pretty badass. Although I've heard that the warriors one is pretty nice as well with the I don't know the name right now that it's called. Let me have a look real quick. This is not a live commentary, so the footage is a little different in the background. But currently I think the only class I still need to level seems to be the Dark Knight, but I can't remember actually what the warrior was like, if you forgive me, because I haven't really played this game throughout 2020 that much. I've said that in my first video on this channel. But I just wanted to make this video to point out to anyone that wants to start out as a tank is that you don't really have to be worried about your responsibility at first. Because if you think about it, unless you start out with a tank like a Dark Knight or even the Gunbreaker, they start at a higher level, so there's like a skill gap that you need to fix, where you're suddenly overwhelmed with all the skills that are available to you. But if you start out with a Gladiator that turns into a Paladin, or a Marauder that ultimately turns into a Warrior, well then you learn the class from level 1 pretty much, and all the skills from the very start. So if you're starting out as a tank, that's all you really have to focus upon. Even though you're like, I would love to play a Dark Knight or a Gunbreaker in particular, then the only advice I could give you, which is so obvious, I mean, you have to be really dumb in a way if you don't get this, but just do lower level dungeons and then learn to play the class. Then slowly but surely you learn how to do everything, and you won't get killed as fast because the dungeons aren't that hard. Unless of course you have a Sprout healer, no offense, but you know, the Sprout, the new healer that doesn't know yet what they are doing themselves. Then it can get a little messy, but it's okay, it happens all the time, it's part of the fun. Sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes I laugh my ass off seeing how the madness unfolds in a dungeon and how everybody is, you know, dying, like DPS standing in the wrong spots, and I'm just like, oh, look at them fly away, man, that's so stupid, dude. But okay, we all make mistakes at times. So as a new player, if you want to get into tanking in Final Fantasy XIV, all you gotta do is just start. That's the best advice I can give you. Just start, don't be afraid. I remember vaguely in 2014 when I first started tanking, because I started out as a DPS. Then I figured, let me start a tank class. It was kind of scary, because even though I actually had no idea what I was supposed to do, because this was my first MMO, so to me a tank class was completely unfamiliar territory, so it was really messy. But then over time I got better and better at it, and right now I'm not going to say I'm the best tank out there in the world, because I don't even do Savage content currently. I might do it in the future again if I want to, but I'm stuck in that cycle of having to use the party finder, and a lot of times it's a giant mess there with random people. You can't communicate effectively during mechanics over a chat box. Personally, I think it's probably easier if you can actually talk to someone over audio chat, or to the whole team if you have one available. So I haven't done the Savage content, but I do all the end game content that is normally there. And so far, you know, I know exactly what I'm doing as a tank. So that's all I'm saying, is that I'm used to tanking, and I think that everybody that wants to start out should give it a shot if they are interested in being sort of the leader in a group and not be afraid to take the lead, because that's what they're gonna expect you to do. You start the dungeon, you're gonna have to pull first. Of course others can pull first, but if you don't catch up to them fast enough, they might die because their defense isn't high enough like your class. So when I first started out, I had to learn how to pull the enemies. Like, I forgot to use certain aggro creating attacks, abilities consistently enough, so I might use it one time, a certain skill that pulls the enemy towards me, but because it was a pack of multiple enemies, I forgot to use it regularly and consistently throughout that progression, throughout that moment of time where we're fighting these enemies. So then I would lose aggro and I would start attacking the DPS or even the healer, and then at first people would call me out like, hey man, you have to use this skill more often so that the enemies stay on you. And that's how I learned it personally, but this is already 7 years ago. So back then, because the game wasn't as big as it is now, people also perhaps maybe are a little more patient. Because right now it is true, some people might just not be patient and they're like, oh, hurry up, learn the game from the get-go. But that is ultimately the best way to learn to play any class, is to just get into it. And even if you fail, don't beat yourself up over it. Don't be scared of what other people think of it. Don't worry too much about whether people like you or dislike you, because sometimes you're going to run into jerks that are going to be very harsh on you in the chat. They might even kick you from the dungeon if they feel like you're just being too stupid. I've had that happen a couple of times myself throughout all these years. I would join a party finder and people would specifically state that new players were welcome. They literally had it there. And I would be like, okay, cool, I can perhaps practice this fight with them. Then we would start the dungeon. And of course, I was one of the tanks. And I didn't know what I was doing because this was a practice for me. And even watching a guide online is pretty popular for people to say that watch a guide online. That's true, it can help you. But if you haven't gone through it literally yourself, it's still tricky to grasp what's going on. So I would get into that fight, mess it up. We would wipe a couple of times, and after a while I noticed that there was a vote kick, but not for me, for one of the DPS. Because they said, you're not doing the right damage, it's too low. Apparently they were using some sort of combat tracker that showed them how many damage they were doing throughout the fight. And they said this DPS wasn't doing their class right, so they kicked him. I was like, damn. I actually didn't even say yes on dismissing this player. I was just thinking, oh well, people, we all gotta learn, but I guess perhaps I was wrong there. If their DPS was too low for whatever reason, so they kicked him. And then, you know, lo and behold, 10 seconds later, I see a black screen and I'm back in the open world again. And it said I was dismissed. I mean, this was in 2014 as well, so 7 years ago again. And for some reason, I felt a little sad about it, kind of offended almost, or disturbed. I was like, I was trying my best so much, man. And then I got kicked? What the fuck? Like, what a bunch of assholes. Like, you kind of want to go crazy on them, but it's just part of the game. So all I'm saying is don't take that personal. Even though you might feel like you want to do that, it happens. Especially, no matter what class you are, basically. So it's not just tanks that deal with this. DPS deal with it, and even healers. So ultimately, all I'm getting at is that tanking shouldn't be scarier than being a DPS. Most people are used to being a DPS, maybe you are, or maybe you're used to being a healer. You know, you have to learn that class. It's gonna be the same with tanking. Don't be scared of it, just get in there and start fucking things up. Start being a tank, start being the shield for your party, and start making the magic happen. Improve as you go along, and then one day you'll probably find that you enjoy tanking quite a bit. If not for one reason, the duty finder is a lot faster. You can get into dungeons so much faster as a tank, because there's always people looking and needing tanks for their dungeon runs. The DPS classes are, of course, most popular, and there's still so many classes for that in general that there's way more people playing that who don't want to take the lead. So for this video, all I wanted to share was some ideas about tanking that I had, that ultimately it's just a matter of time. If you start out from the beginning, even if you start with Dark Knight or Gunbreaker, what I personally did with the Dark Knight back in Heavensward when it came out, was to just go to the lowest dungeon possible and to really get my feel for all the new skills that this class had, what they were all about, how I should implement them, etc. And then I learned that class pretty rapidly because I was already a paladin at the time. And it's gonna be the same for you, so don't be scared of it. Take the leap, become a tank, and protect your team. Take the leap, become a tank, and protect your team. Show them how fucking awesome you really are. Anyways, with that being said, if you want to see more Final Fantasy XIV videos in the future, be sure to subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.